Happy Friday, everybody, and a huge warm welcome to you all to today's Leaf Surgery, marking the start of our new season. I hope you've all managed to have some downtime over summer, or perhaps you've stayed as busy as Leaf has. And yeah, today a very, very warm welcome to Grace O'Dwyer, currently the Deputy Head of Agriculture for HSBC Bank UK. Grace spent over 20 years working in the agricultural sector before joining HSBC 7 years ago, with experience ranging from multinational agrochemical industry, policy work at the NFU, working with supply chains and processors across the food chain, and supporting farm businesses across the UK. Just thank you so much for joining us today, Grace. Can't wait to get talking to you. Just to let you all know, as normal, there will be time for a few questions at the end of today's surgery, so please do submit them via the chat thread. We will get to as many as possible. And today I have Callum Bennett from the LEAF team helping me out. But just before we get to today's very exciting discussion, as always, I'm going to share a quick update of LEAF's activity, and I've got to cover a few months this time. So for another year running, Groundswell exceeded our expectations for the quality of visitor engagement, the conversations we had, the talks we heard, the debates, the shared learning, the best practice. And we were delighted to host our Honorary President, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Edinburgh, at our stand, and also at the LEAF talk led by LEAF Chairman Philip Wynne. And we were unpacking that question: how do we inspire the next generation of sustainable food producers? And we were so overjoyed that Her Royal Highness contributed so animatedly in that discussion. We've also been busy continuing to develop our LEAF network, and we are delighted to announce the launch of Warwick Crop Centre online on Wednesday, the 18th of September from 4 till 5 o'clock. This is a virtual launch, so please do tune into that. Details on our website. And then we are also equally delighted to launch Hunter Pack as a LEAF demonstration farm on the 27th, Friday the 27th of September. That's going to be an in-person celebration. Hunter Pack are just currently participating in one of our exciting projects, Journey to Net Zero. I cannot recommend them more highly as a wonderful example of innovative thinking and practice within the produce sector. So really, really proud to be working with them. And finally, we're launching the second public consultation on the LEAF Marque standard. It opens on the 1st of October. It lasts for 60 days, and this is your opportunity to have your say and to help shape the LEAF Marque standard. Revisions have been made in response to the first consultation, so please access the second public consultation and the process via our website. Again, there are a number of ways to get involved, whether you submit your feedback through surveys, emails, phone calls, and also we're going to be holding some webinars. And for the first time ever, we'll be holding a webinar in Spanish as well. So please do go onto our website to get more details about that second public consultation on our LEAF Marque standard. So without any further delay, Grace, it's a huge privilege to welcome you to the LEAF Surgery today. Earlier this week, HSBC announced the launch of their Sustainable Farming Pathway in partnership with LEAF Marque. The scheme will enable LEAF Marque certified farmers to access green finance products. And Grace, it's been an absolute privilege to be working with you and your team on this programme. So let's get into the questions. I wonder if you could start by just telling us a little bit about it, please.
Yeah, no problem at all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
So a little bit about me. As Deputy Head of Agriculture, I've got a great role. I've got an opportunity to spend time with our farming businesses the length and breadth of the UK, understanding what their aspirations are for their businesses, what the challenges they face, and being part of that capturing the opportunities. So it's I live in the middle of everywhere. I'm living in Oxfordshire, so I spend a lot of time out and about. And then a big other part of my role is talking to people within the bank and explaining and translating what agriculture as a sector does for us, both in terms of sort of the obvious food production, but also in looking after nature and other benefits such as the role we could play in human health.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about your relationship with the farming community. How does HSBC interact with your farm-based clients?
I can probably talk about this in a number of ways, Claire. If I just talk about our teams, we've got 100 relationship managers or just over, and some are out and about day to day meeting customers. Some have a little bit more of an office-based role and engage using platforms such as the one we're on today. But what those relationship managers bring are two key things. One is an understanding of banking and finance and how to apply that to businesses. But really importantly, they have an understanding of agriculture and of the sector. And they come from a variety of different backgrounds. Some are agriculturalists, some have a farming background themselves, others come from a very embedded banking background. So there's a real blend there in terms of the team that we've got. But as I alluded to earlier, we have a great opportunity to sort of translate banking into the farming sector, but also translate farming back into the bank so that we can create and shape the bank strategy to support the sector. And because of that, all of us need to really understand the factors that are influencing our sector, whether it's the economic, social, political aspects influencing what farmers can do and what opportunities are there. And I don't need to tell anybody listening in, I'm sure, about the impact of volatility, whether that's in input and output prices, or what the weather will do to a farming business. And that's been very clear this year. Different businesses impacted in different ways. Often when we look at agriculture from a financier perspective, we will think that farming businesses really leverage products such as overdrafts or loans. And what's quite interesting is as farming businesses are changing and growing and evolving, they have other requirements. So it's great to be part of a wider bank that has other things we can bring to the table when our customers are growing and expanding and changing. But really the core of it is often understanding what's going on in that farm with those dynamics. When do they need access to working capital and cash, and being able to understand the unpredictable rhythm that farming often has. No two farms are the same, no 2 years are the same. So in summary, I guess I'd say it's really important that we recognise the immediate needs of the farming businesses that we work with, but we also really understand where the sector is going and what it's facing into.
Thanks, Grace. And I think that's so true. The volatility out there, the uncertainty for the farming community is absolute. But there is so much innovation and an opportunity for farmers to get involved in too. So I think that must be really interesting in how you interact with your farming community as well, looking at what, the great stuff that we can do, whilst recognizing that it's a really challenging time for some farming. Brilliant, thank you. So what role do you see for the financial sector to support the farming sector moving forwards, whether that's in the shorter term or the longer term?
So I think to kind of answer that, I probably need to just really reflect back on the fact that the farming sector is going to need to change. It's always embraced change, but building that innate resilience and embedding innovation and moving forward into the sustainable farming production and whatever that phrase means on individual farms, and that sort of drivers coming from government and coming from supply chains. So what we really understand is that farming is evolving, and in order to enable us to support that, there's a number of things that we do. One is, as we've talked about, investment, funding and investment. What do businesses need now and what will they need in the future? But it's a bit more than that, and it needs to be more than that because we need to be a partner in the strategy of those farming businesses, really being able to unpick what they're trying to achieve so that any funding is the correct funding and is doing the right thing for the business. We need to understand how that farm is mitigating the challenges it faces, and not just individual farms, but the wider sector. And that could be things that are quite topical now, like changing disease pressures that we see and see this year and have seen in past years that impact whole sectors. We also need to retain our glass half full approach and be optimistic about the opportunities there are. Look at those business plans, debate them with the professionals around the table, with the farmer and the farming family. As a wider business, we have connections into supply chains. So we can get a bit of an understanding as to what some of the big integrators are thinking about, some of those wider businesses that are influencing our farming customers. I'm a great believer in collaboration, and I think this partnership we'll talk about hopefully a little bit more this morning. Being part of those collaborations for us means we can bring our perspective and, in this case, our incentives to support farming through that change. And it's probably worth me mentioning, we do that on a global scale as well. We've had partnerships with the World, the WWF, and with a partner called Climate Asset Management, where we're looking at things such as natural capital assets and nature-based carbon projects, because those are potentially part of that solution for agriculture. The other thing I would just like to say, and I probably wouldn't have time to talk about it because it's such a huge topic, but we do talk to our farming customers about some of the challenges they face, with a particular leaning on fraud, because we are seeing a lot of fraud, and it can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. We have a specific app that anybody, don't have to be a HSBC customer, but it will give you alerts on what we're seeing, what we're observing in that complex web. And it really goes to that risk management piece that we can bring to support individual businesses.
Thanks, Grace. That's brilliant. I love that phrase you used, partner, being a partner in their strategy, I think is absolutely key. And that role of collaboration across the industry to support farmers and growers is really key moving forwards. So thank you for that. Right, let's get to the Sustainable Farming Pathway. Can you share how the Sustainable Farming Pathway came about and what is it trying to achieve?
First of all, I would like to give a shout out to the LEAF team. We've worked with you for quite a while on this, and you've been really, really supportive, and it's been two very different organisations coming together with a mutual goal. What we've been trying to do with all of our customers is find ways that we can support as customers navigate through their transition to a more sustainable, more potentially nature-friendly way of producing food. Now, we identified that a large proportion of our farmers are already doing an awful lot in this area. And we wanted to find a mechanism where we could recognise this and validate it. So really say, this is what's already happening. But also we know that some of our customers haven't started the journey. They don't know where to start. So again, anything we brought out into the agricultural sector, we wanted to make sure it had an element of support. So if someone hasn't, or a business hasn't already started on this trajectory, they could engage with organisations that could help them. And then on the final piece of the puzzle was, if people are already doing it or trying to get there, we believed that an incentive was appropriate. And that's where the discounted arrangement fee came into play. So I guess many people here may already have picked up on the press releases, but it's pretty early days. So in effect, in terms of the context of LEAF, where a farming business can demonstrate their environmental credentials with that LEAF Marque certification or evidence that they are on that journey through the LSFR, then we at HSBC will recognise that when they take out certain lending products by giving them that discounted loan arrangement fee. there's loads of information both on our website and the LEAF website if you want to know more or ask me questions when we get to the end of this conversation. But in essence, our drivers were, we wanted something that would apply to a whole farm. So this is not about one individual project. It's about the approach the whole farm is taking, and also something that would apply relatively straightforwardly, quite a big ask, I admit, across the whole of the agricultural sector. And when we were designing it, we wanted to make sure that it was as broad and as wide as possible. So I guess in summary, we know that the sector has a lot of challenges to meet, and this pathway is there to support that transition, but doing so in the context of building resilient supply chains as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grace. Yeah, and we've so enjoyed working on this program and this project with you, as we've said. And I think it's so important that we recognise that farmers and growers need that additional support on their transitional journey, for those that haven't started yet, for those that are further down the line. And I just think this is such a brilliant beacon for the financial industries and other service industries out there that have farmers and growers as their clients. It's such a good example. LEAF is delighted to be working with HSBC on this industry-leading initiative. What do you feel LEAF could offer? What do you feel LEAF could offer the pathway, or what did you feel LEAF could offer the pathway before perhaps we started our conversations? And how might impact be measured?
Oh, so I'll do the first one first. I guess there's almost two questions in there. So
Yeah.
when we wanted to design something to launch for the agricultural sector, we needed to be really clear that this was not something that we would have all the answers to. So we wanted to engage with partners that had solutions and support already available that would enable us to move quickly when we needed to. So if we tried to design something from the beginning, it would have been an even longer journey. When we started our conversations, well, to be fair, we are already very aware of LEAF. We're very aware of all of the positive things you have been doing as a charity and through LEAF Marque. We have many customers who've been LEAF Marque accredited for a long number of years, and we understand how they leverage that with their supply chains, but we also understand the benefits that has provided for those businesses in terms of giving them a focus and thinking about what it is they need to do to get even better. So in short, LEAF is very deep rooted in the agricultural sector. The other piece it does, as I mentioned before, is that whole farm approach. So I know the standard has evolved over the years, and you alluded to another consultation. You think about your standard and your approach to sustainability in a really practical way that thinks about everything a farm could do, but also can be tailored to those individual farming businesses. So it is not as prescriptive as one might think. It gives a lot of flexibility, and it's really adaptable. You can take it and you can think, how do I apply this? And a very long time ago, I can remember working with a UK retailer who wanted to take this out to some of the pepper growing areas of Spain, and I know how adaptable that standard can be in those sort of scenarios. A huge piece of the positive perspective we got from our discussions with LEAF is the whole support and education element of what you do in your wider charity, whether it's the demo farms where people can really start to engage in discussion about what are the right things, what works, what doesn't, what have people tried. You've been brilliant in training our own teams and helping them understand more about how to approach sustainable farming and how different farmers can adapt. But also you have that public engagement and education piece, I think, which is something for agriculture to really grab hold of. And I won't shy away from the fact that you have a robust standard. You have really strong governance. You've got, as I said, it's comprehensive. It's not any one single issue. It's the range of elements that a farm can bring in, and it can be tailored. Coming back to impact, the impact we will be able to capture the impact in terms of the number of farms, the types of farms that engage with the Sustainable Farming Pathway. We already have had, it has only been a few days, an awful lot of interest from current customers and from other farming businesses, some of whom are already LEAF Marque accredited, some of whom are not. So I think even initially we've got that immediate impact. I think the wider impact, though, will be in about that continued messaging and evolving this, not just with yourselves, but also with other organisations that have benefits that they can bring to our farming customers. And in addition, this is all about engaging conversations. Let's talk together and learn with each other. What are some of the things that really move the dial? A lot of what we are doing on farm is really positive for sustainability, but also really positive for that business resilience. So let's look at it in terms of impact in its broadest sense.
Thanks, Grace. That's a really useful idea there in terms of we've got that broader impact and the impact that we can have across the industry, and then also with the mechanisms that LEAF has and through our LEAF Marque certification process, then we can also accentuate that with impacting very specific areas as well, soil health, water quality, things like that. So I think the two together will just be very, very helpful in terms of understanding where that, you know, that baseline might be and how we collectively move forward. So thank you so much for that. Ultimately, Grace, what might a resilient farm business look like to HSBC?
We talk about this a lot, and I stand on a lot of platforms, and I often get asked a question around, you know, a good business. What I would say is it's never any one thing that makes a business resilient, in the same way that there's never one thing that causes a business to get into difficulty. There are many characteristics, but if I sort of thought about what are the first ones that come to mind, I think efficiency within a business is absolutely critical. This does need close attention to things like the P&L. What is the cost of production? But on a wider basis, what is the technical expertise and standard within the business? All of those things interlink. And it's the same when a business looks at it in terms of sustainability. Sustainability and efficiency completely overlap. If we are looking at the right metrics and we are acting on them in the appropriate way, that efficiency just grows and grows. And there's a lot of technology that farmers are grabbing that is helping that efficiency. That might be genetics, it might be technology on farm, it might be kit, it might be data and insight. And that's sort of quite a lot wrapped in that one word. The other piece that usually stands out in high performing businesses that have been doing so for quite a while is the idea of a plan and a strategy. Now, it can be quite difficult to plan with all the volatility that we see in the sector, and with the unknowns with things like weather. But having that plan and understanding that when a crosswind hits, what your contingencies might be can be really critical. And also having that longer term strategy of where are we trying to get to? What are we trying to achieve? So when things get a bit challenging, we take the appropriate actions. Again, something we see a lot in strong performing businesses. However, the thing that we always come back to is people. It's the people who run the business. It's the people who drive the efficiency and land that strategy. And the characteristics that come out in spades in well-performing businesses comes down to mindset. It comes down to adaptability and either collaborating with professionals or benchmarking or other partners. But the core of it is all of those businesses play to their strengths. It doesn't matter the size of business. It doesn't matter whether they're doing the same thing they've always done or they're diversified. It's playing to strengths and really looking at what are the challenges they're going to face. And in the context of this morning, that could be as big as climate change and the net zero strive. There's some big challenges out there, but those are some of the ingredients. honestly, Claire, I could talk about this for a long time, but I think I'm going to pause.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grace. That's wonderful. Look, we've got a lot of questions coming through, so perhaps I won't take up myself too much more of your time. I'm going to throw in one final question. What might your call to action be for other service providers, other actors out there? Do you have do you have any advice or any suggestions to who else might get on board to help farmers and growers?
So I think there's we've all got a role to play. So I think there are parts of the supply chain that are customers to our farmers that have a role and frankly are looking at how they can help and support. We're all learning on this. No one of us have got the whole answer. We wouldn't have got this far if we hadn't collaborated. So I think my call to action is collaborate for the wider supply chain. And I think to farmers is explore it, explore these options. They may not fit with your business, and that's absolutely fine. We'll still lend to farmers if they don't feel the sustainable farming pathway is appropriate. But do explore these things, because you mentioned groundswell, and I think that's where a lot of conversations happen, and a lot of businesses might nudge their thinking forward bit by bit, and that's as good an approach as any.
Thanks, Grace. That's brilliant. Well, I'm going to pause there and I'm going to ask Callum. Callum, I can see that there's been a stream of questions coming through. Might you be able to share some with Grace, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. There are quite a few questions coming through, as you said, Claire, so I'll try and stick to kind of just one per person and move through some of the ones that came in first there. The first question was from Sarah Palmer from the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs. And she was asking, with services moving more online, are HSBC ag managers running any meetings or workshops that might be of interest to the younger generation of farmers? And if not, might that be a future opportunity?
Good morning, Sarah. We have within our agriculture team regional agriculture directors. So these are subject matter experts in all things agricultural. They work with me on our strategy, but also what the sector needs, and all of us engage hugely with the next generation coming through. And the things I most look forward to in my diary is when I see an agricultural college where I'm going to talk to students and the next generation around business, what a business plan looks like, the art of the possible, because the engagement I get, the can-do attitude, and frankly the most challenging questions often come from there, and that all helps inform us. So we do engage both in terms of that collective, but also when we're on farm talking to our customers. It's always great when the next generation is there, even if they haven't fully taken on the reins of the business, because we are really, really aware of how multidimensional or multi-generational the sector is.
Great, thank you for that, Grace. The next question was from Georgia and was asking kind of how this scheme differs from some other incentives out there, such as ELMS, co-op incentive schemes, biodiversity net gain, and kind of how it might add to it as another layer, I guess.
So I would think of this as another opportunity in a different way. So some of the things you've described there is we have government incentivizing farmers specifically to do things on their farm, and they get that will be rewarded accordingly. The supply chains have commodity-based incentives, so you might get a premium for meeting certain quality metrics, and then increasingly we're seeing supply chains look at sustainability metrics, and if you hit certain parameters then you get an incentive. This is when you're about to make a decision to invest in your business and you need a loan. Whatever that loan, the purpose of that loan is for, if you're able to demonstrate your whole business is walking towards the principles of LEAF and LEAF Marque, then you get an incentive. So they're not mutually exclusive. I think the phrase I hear a lot is they're stacking. Think of it as building on all of those opportunities, because everybody in that web has got something that could support your business. So they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, I know from some of the pieces within the LEAF Marque standard, and Claire, please correct me if I'm going off piste, but you know, there are elements of that which overlap perfectly with ELMS or the SFI. So again, you get two birds for one.
Brilliant, thank you, Grace. There's a question, I guess, that's more for you, Claire, around kind of building demand and conversations with the retailers around the uptake of LEAF Marque in the livestock sector, and how many conversations on that are progressing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'd love to answer that question. Yes, obviously LEAF Marque has grown significantly over the last few years. UK based now, very much with that global facing as well. LEAF Marque is a global standard, and we've grown hugely, and particularly across produce, fresh produce, fruit and vegetables. But LEAF Marque is a whole farm standard, so we can approve LEAF Marque certified products across all types of sectors, whether that's livestock, arable, and beyond. So thank you for this question. We are having some very exciting discussions with other sectors and retailers looking to use LEAF Marque certification or work with LEAF in other areas. So very excited to announce that over the last few weeks there's a taste of difference range of products in Sainsbury's in their bakery department that are made using LEAF Marque certified wheat, baked perhaps is the right word, and we're having really exciting discussions elsewhere as well, particularly in the livestock sector and beyond. So the answer is yes, we are super busy in those discussions at the moment, and yeah, I think it's just a great credit and a great recognition that LEAF Marque takes that whole farm approach and does recognise produce from all sectors. So that's really exciting for us. And just to answer one of the other questions, because it's connected, I hope you don't mind, Callum, if I take that liberty, but I did notice in the thread there was a question around, does the Sustainable Farming Pathways apply to all sectors, all types of farm, whether they're arable, dairy? Yes, the answer is absolutely. It applies to all types of farm. So please do reach out to HSBC and get more information if you are interested, regardless of what type of farm you are. Back to you, Callum. Thank you.
Sure. So the next question was from David, and was asking whether you think that there's scope for other service providers to the agricultural sector to follow this model of the HSBC Sustainable Farming Pathway and add to these financial incentives to adopt accredited sustainability standards.
I think that other parts of the supply chains are looking at that. So I would say yes, there's great opportunity. I think so where we started was, what are we trying to achieve? What do we want to do? And the solution, part of the solution, was an accredited standard. So I think it doesn't necessarily run to accredited standards solve everything, but what that gives us is that external validation, that what gives a farming business that external validation that somebody else can stand up and say, this farm has done what they've said they were going to do. And I think just, Claire, back to your point about, is it for every sector? It needs to be quite open. What we don't want to do is inadvertently cut people off. So I think starting wide, we have started relatively small, but this is growing very quickly in just a week. So there are many other partners and organizations that could get involved in this, and accredited standards are part of the solution. But as I alluded to earlier, the education and the support and helping farmers to take this journey. If you're already flying with LEAF Marque, you don't necessarily need that support in the same way, and actually your role is probably different. Your role might be those demo farms. So the solution is wider and deeper than just a financial incentive. But at HSBC, we felt that the financial incentive was very valid, and it was about recognising what farmers are already doing, and then incentivizing farmers who maybe hadn't taken that step, because we've got the support, because it can be change can be a bit concerning, it could be a bit daunting, but once you've made that step, then we recognise that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Grace. That makes a lot of sense. I think the next bit is to kind of combine two questions slightly about how does the HSBC Ag team support farmers in their strategy and planning, particularly around climate change and resilience.
Okay, so well, this today is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
When we have conversations with customers, we will talk about the challenges that their businesses are facing. We have a huge organization. We have lots and lots of experts. One of our senior climate and sustainability individuals used to work in government. So we have connections and we have experts that we can bring to bear in terms of our managers being able to go and ask questions. But we are not the experts. So the other thing that we do is connecting our farming customers with professionals who can really help them in the same way we would do traditionally. If a business was in a particular in a tricky position, we know there's farm business consultants that would be the right people for them to talk to. In the same way, we're seeing some of those businesses build their environmental departments or sustainability departments. So new expertise is continually coming into the sector, and a big part of our role is to support our farmers by asking them questions, being curious, understanding what's going on in the business. And then when there are things that they may need support with, it's not always us who will be the direct advisors at all. More often, it will be us connecting those farmers and those farming businesses with our wider network.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grace. I think this one might be a bit more of a question for you again, Claire. But there was a question from Ian around how LEAF Marque retains a premium market position rather than simply becoming a market access requirement.
Thanks, Callum. Thanks, Ian. That's a great question. Look, in terms of the premiumization, I think a lot of it is about allowing farmers to demonstrate, allowing LEAF Marque certified farmers and farmers on that journey to demonstrate their best practice. And I think that we're trying to capture that within our new version of the LEAF Marque standard, version 17. So please do, if I can encourage you again to participate in that second public consultation. Hopefully you will see for yourselves that we are designing this standard very much to support farmers and growers on that journey, in particular with continuous improvement. So I think that's one of the ways that we can support the continued improvement of LEAF Marque. I think some of it also comes down to the practicalities of how LEAF operates. We have that direct farmer relationship, which is unique actually to a standard, really. And so we hear directly from farmers. We are involved in projects with farmers. We have the LEAF network of demonstration farmers again. So we can then build the LEAF Marque standard and the support that we offer. We can build that excellence and that continuous improvement in. And I think in terms of the practical things that we can do, internally we are continuously benchmarking the LEAF Marque standard and continuously looking at how we might support not only that continuous improvement for farmers that we might recognise here in the UK, but also how we support a global community of farmers who actually in some cases are very small or are existing in very complex contexts. So again, how do we enable those farmers to demonstrate their best practice too? So it's a recipe of many different things that we do to enable LEAF Marque to lead the way in terms of environmental indicators, environmental impact. Yeah, so hopefully that's answered your question, Ian.
Thanks, Claire. Do we have time for maybe one more?
Maybe one more question. Thank you, Callum. Yeah.
Sure. So the last question was from Louisa. and was focused on how HSBC ensures that the transition risk is kept out of farm gates. So I guess how through projects like this, risk to the farmer is minimised.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So by transition risk, just to, I'll because again, this is where language is quite interesting. So for us, transition risk is the risk to a business of climate change. So we look at this whole area of sustainability and climate change in two ways. One is, what can farmers do, to reduce their emissions and things like that. And I think there's a lot of onus on every part of the supply chain to do that. What our initiative in the Sustainable Farming Pathway is to enable farmers to demonstrate and get recognition for what they are doing, and we recognise it with those discounted arrangement fees. However, in terms of transition risk, we do talk to customers, and I was up in small anecdote. I was up in Yorkshire last week on a farm, and they had basically taken about 20 acres out of production because in the last 10 years they flooded every year. They hadn't flooded in the previous 50 years, but before that, and they had records going back, there had been things. So the impact of weather and flooding in that area. So what they'd done instead was they had turned that into wetlands. They'd got Natural England funding. They'd done loads of things. But the other piece they'd done is they'd built a huge flood bank. So that protected the rest of their farm. So the good arable land was ready to build. There was a strip of a bird cover, flower mix strips as well. But they'd really thought about not just what I'm being asked to do, but what's happening to my farm and what do I need to do. Now, I'm pretty sure the things that farm was doing to build resilience, to protect against transition risk, align completely with what LEAF and the LEAF Marque standard would like to see. But they'd done it in a way that brought income into their farm. So this is what I mean about have conversations, go and see some of these demo farms, go and have explore the art of the possible, because there's lots of different factors impacting. And I don't think I'm fully answering that question, but hopefully that gives you some perspective from me.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, Grace. I think it's there's the angle of there's a risk of not acting, as well as there's of course a risk when practices change, but in the broader context of a changing climate and more difficult weather, there's also a risk to not acting at all. And through projects like this, HSBC is encouraging engagement with funding streams and so on to encourage acting.
Thank you, Callum. I couldn't have summed it up better myself. I'll leave you with that one.
I think that'll be all that we have time for today, is it, Claire?
Oh, it is. Thank you so much. Thanks to Callum, who has been brilliant at fielding those questions. Grace, a huge thanks to you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with our membership and our stakeholders. It's been a really great conversation, and we're just so excited about the Sustainable Farming Pathway. And last but not least, a huge thank you to today's audience. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for asking such great questions as well. We have our next LEAF surgery on Friday, the 11th of October, where we will be talking about our LEAF Water Beacons of Excellence. And anybody that knows me knows how excited I will be about that, because I am very passionate about water. So yeah, just to wish everybody a very peaceful, relaxing weekend. Yeah, thank you again, and see you at the next surgery.